Hey everybody. So today we're going to start working on chapter 4 that looks at the physical, social, and cultural influences that affect political decision making. So last week we talked about some of those drivers that shape how our political leaders make their decisions. But those decisions don't exist in just a vacuum. Rather, political decision making is also structured and influenced and constrained by external structures as well. And those are the physical world we live in, the earth, the social institutions or constraints on decision making behavior. That is, the type of communities that we live in affect the choices that we have. And culture, okay? Culture shapes the decisions that our political leaders make. That is, the beliefs, the customs, arts, particular views of society, shared history, language, etc. All those type of things shape political decision making as well. So, in this chapter, we're looking at how those physical, social, and cultural variables affect political decision making. So take a minute and think about what physical aspects could affect political decision making. So we have to think back, what is politics? Well, it's a contest for power, and with that power we decide who gets what and when. So what parts of the physical environment might affect political decision making? Well, environmental degradation, food and water scarcity, big issues, especially in the Middle East. Conflict, competition, need for natural resources, oil, steel, etc. We also have to think of the biological and the physiological and the psychological aspects that determine political decision making. We have to think about human nature. We have to think about perhaps Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to think about aspects of our social communities that affect political decision making. Are we an ethnically diverse community? Are we more homogenous? What role does religion play on the political decisions that we're going to make? What about race? What about our socioeconomic status? These are all external variables that affect how we make our political decisions. And then, lastly, again, we have to think about culture. This is our vision of what life is like, what it should be, what does it mean. Those are all variables that affect decision making through a cultural lens. So now let's plumb down a little deeper into those physical characteristics, or the physical variables that affect our decision making. And we're going to begin by the physical constraints on political behavior. Now, to the best of our knowledge, the Earth is the only inhabitable planet, at least in our galaxy, if not the universe. I have no idea. But what does this really mean? It means we as a species aren't going anywhere. We are stuck on this little blue ball that goes spinning around and blasting through space. And so our political world is influenced by our relatively small physical world that we live in. Probably the biggest issue with living in this limited space is, limited space for one. In many countries, there's a tremendous population growth in particular areas to the point where the land just simply cannot support that many people. Subsequently, our political space is characterized by limited food resources, other natural resources, water. Wars have been fought between Lebanon and Israel over water scarcity. We also have to think of our constraints through environmental degradation. Is our environment sustainable to human life? These are all external factors that shape our decision-making process. But let's focus here briefly on this concept of scarce resources. What leads to scarce resources? Well, in a nutshell, population growth and environmental degradation. We're getting too many people consuming too many resources, and that directly puts us into competition with one another. So let's think about population growth. The Earth presently has over 7 billion people. I don't even know how many that is. That's a number that is very difficult to fathom. However, this population is supposed to increase to 9 billion by 2050. Now, it's interesting to think about, well, why is this population growth such an issue now? Hasn't it always been that case? And the short answer is no. Population growth used to not be a tremendous concern. Why is it important now? Well, or how did it get to be a problem? Usually through three things. We have the agricultural revolution, where we increased the productivity of farmland. We created more food. More food can sustain more people. Subsequently, we see increased population growth. We also have the industrial revolution, where we see an increase in technology, a shift in the way that humans work and trade and interact. Through the use of advancements in technology, we can live longer, we can sustain more people. Probably most importantly, we see improvements in medicine. It wasn't that long ago where we still would cut someone with a razor blade, let the blood pour out of them, and somehow think that heals them. Where now we can use our medical technology to prolong life for a good long time. And let's think about what problems might emerge from this population growth. Well, as we said, there can be scarcity of resources, which lead to potential conflicts. We also have what we might call, or is often called, a youth bulge. So in countries like the developing countries in Asia, Africa, etc., they have a lot of young people within their population. Now this is problematic because if you have too many young people, they become idle, they become unemployed. This can lead to conflict. They're disenfranchised, a lot of potential strife when you have too many young people. So we really have to think about, when we think about politics, this idea of carrying capacity. What size population can the Earth support, and how do we get to that magic number? Not easy, because resource scarcity is ultimately. Okay, so how do we measure carrying capacity? Well, it varies from country to country. For example, in Canada, there are 10 Canadians per mile. That's not very many. That's a lot of land per individual. Now, in other places like Singapore, we have 18,000 people per mile. Very congested, very overpopulated place. Not enough land to support those people. So why is this problematic? Because we need a balance between population and food. If we have a lot of people, generally you're a powerful country. But if you have too many people, it can lead to instability, especially in light of resource scarcity and what have you. So the U.S. has about 350 million people. Big, powerful country. But what makes it also powerful is the fact that we can feed everybody. And that is really the key to maintaining power. So we talked about the physical world, external to humans. But the external world is not the only thing that affects political behavior for human beings here on Earth. We also have to think about the biological, physiological, psychological, and social aspects of being human that shapes the way that we structure our relationships between one another. So let's think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that's a good way to usher in this idea here. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs essentially highlights those things that humans need to survive and be happy, successful, etc. And so I think if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can start to think about those things that affect our political decision making. So you can envision a triangle, and at the top are the most advanced maybe not as necessary needs as the bottom of the triangle, the widest part. So, working from the bottom, Maslow argues that human beings need physiological needs. That is, air, water, food, shelter, clothing, and to reproduce. Okay, these are basic things that humans need. Moving up in our hierarchy of needs, we have the need for safety, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. These are under our safety needs. Moving up further, we have love and belonging. We as humans have a need for friendship, intimacy, family. We need to have a series of connections in order to be happy little animals. Getting closer to the top, we have esteem needs: respect, self-esteem, recognition, strength, freedom, etc. And lastly, self-actualization needs. And this is the desire to be the most that one could be. So, I would argue that Maslow's hierarchy has a direct effect on how we participate in politics. One of the major reasons that we come together as human beings is to provide that basic safety that we all require in order to live in any sort of society. In addition to that, man is a social animal who craves belonging, love, affection, and part of a political group provides those needs to our particular individuals. So our biology, our psychology, our needs as a human being, as a human animal, can directly impact our political decision-making process as well. Alright, so what's our major takeaways from Chapter 4? We do not operate in a vacuum. Our political needs are influenced by the external environment. This can be the environmental, it could be biological, physiological, psychological, social. All these different things come together to shape how we view not only ourselves but others, and they help structure how we design our social institutions. So stay tuned in Chapter 5. We're going to start to discuss modern philosophy.